بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على النبي المبعوث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه إلى يوم الدين. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل وألهمنا رشدنا يا رب العالمين. Alhamdulillah, we are continuing our look at Maraqi al-Falah, and we are still looking at the rulings related to water, and we stopped at water that has been conditioned. Right? Water that has been conditioned, and we're supposed to diagram this for clarity. The underlying principle in this is that water is required for wudu. And what is water? Water is that which is considered water. That which is considered water. الماء المطلق is ما يسبق إلى الذهن عند إطلاق لفظ الماء. Is that which comes to mind if you say water. ولم يقم به خبث, right? And there's no filth that has affected it. ولا معنى يمنع جواز التطهير, and nor a meaning that prevents purification. So if water is affected by filth, it's filthy. If it becomes used, it's used. But what if water is affected by something pure? The governing consideration is صحة إطلاق اسم الماء عليه. Is that, can you still call this water? So the earlier Hanafi scholars generally dealt with this on a case-by-case basis. And they had particular principles that they came to agree. On this kind of thing, this is what we say. But there's a whole variety of opinions. So there's pockets of agreement and other areas of disagreement. But given the multitude of consideration, because it depends on what kind of thing affects the water, in what context, is it a pool of water, a river of water, a pond, an irrigation channel, is it narrow, is it, like all kinds of different issues, and what is mixing with it, why is it mixed in it, how it mixed with it. So they're very wary of giving a governing criteria. But there are pockets of criteria that are had. Then finally, and there's phases of distilling. Imam al-Zaydai gave sort of the final distilling of the ضابط الماء المقيد, right? The consideration for water that has been, or ضابط الماء الذي غلب غيره عليه, right? The criterion for water that has been overcome by something else that is pure, right? من الطاهرة. So, and of course he didn't just come up with it. He's sort of distilling what a lot of scholarship before him was coming to consist, but to reduce it down to rather than a whole set of furu', but into a governing criteria. So let's see what Imam Al-Bulali rahimahullah tells us. Right? And this is of course a subcategory of what? Of al-ma' al-tahir غير المطهر. So we have the third category of water, which is al-ma' al-tahir, pure but not purified. You have al-ma' al-musta'mal, used water, and al-ma' الذي غلب غيره عليه, the water that has been overcome by something else. Now, water can become overcome, right? لا بماء زال طبعه بالطبخ. water that lost its tabr, its nature through cooking. Because you mix a little bit of a solid, you cook it, the nature of cooking is, if you look at quantity, it didn't just mix, right? This kamalul imtizaj, it become completely mixed. Such that after the cooking, would you still call that water? Okay. So for example, if you took solids, with solids, if you mix them in water, does it make a difference if the color, smell, or taste change? No. As long as you can still call it water, and it flows like water, right? It flows like water, it has the nature of water, and you can still call it water, right? So let's say you put a cinnamon stick in water, and 2 drops of olive oil, 3 drops of olive oil. What happens? You look at it, it acquires a little bit of color, whatever, but you say it's still water. A little bit of taste, whatever, it's still water. But you put those in a pot and you cook it, becomes something very different. Or type of cooking is boiling the tea. If you took this cup and you put a few specks of tea, what happens? Not much. It'll take a while, it'll change it. We'll say, what is it? It's water, but it's got funny color. Is it water? Yeah. But those same 2-3 pieces of 2-3 tea leaves, you cook them in the water. Right? Kamalul imtizaj takes place, right? Complete mixing takes place. You can no longer call it water. That's why so something mixing with water, there's tabkh or ghalaba, which is just khalt, right? Or mukhalata, right? Just mixing, i.e. without cooking, because cooking has a deeper effect. So, where did we stop exactly?
ولا بما إن زال طبعه.
ثم قال رحمه الله تعالى بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا من فضلك علما يا رب العالمين. قال الإمام أبو الإخلاص الشرملاني رحمه الله تعالى ولا يجوز الوضوء بماء زال طبعه. It is not permitted, لا يجوز ولا يصح الوضوء بماء زال طبعه, that lost its طبع, its nature, وهو الرقة والسيلان. To have رقة and سيلان. You need the والإرواء والإنبات, and it quenches thirst like water, and والإنبات, and it and it is plants grow through it, things grow through it. These two, interestingly, were not mentioned in Imdad al-Fattah, his original commentary. And now Tahtawi says, Al-Awla adamu dhikriha. Why? Because these two qualities, al-irwa, quenching thirst, and that they're means for things to grow, do not apply to seawater, even though it would be considered water. Right? And that's mentioned by Tahtawi. بالطبخ, through cooking. بنحو حمص, right? Now, modern Arabs pronounce it as almost, but we've mentioned this principle. Love your dictionary, right? Love your dictionary. Of course, when it comes to fruits and vegetables and animals, it's also really entertaining to read al-Firozabadi al-Qamus al-Muhit. Because they have very interesting things to say about all kinds of fruits and vegetables. It's quite an interesting answer. بنحو حمص وعدس, like with chickpeas and عدس, lentils. لأنه إذا برد ثخل or إذا برد ثخل, because when it cools it thickens, so it doesn't have the nature of water. كما إذا طبخ بما يقصد به النظافة, just like if the water is cooked with something that you see cleanliness with, right? كالسدر وصار ثخينا, and becomes thick. Now a shared category across any type of mixing with water is صحة إطلاق اسم الماء عليه. Can you still call it water? If you could still call it water, doesn't matter what happened to it, it is not مقيد. صحة إطلاق اسم, that's the الماء المطلق. الماء المطلق is what we would call ماء. So these are all criteria that help us determine that it's water. And the reason that condition is important is when you come to, for example, liquid chlorine. The liquid chlorine in water, and it's blue liquid chlorine. Now, if a liquid mixes with water, what is the criteria? ظهور الأوصاف. إذا غلبت أوصاف المخالط كان الماء مغلوبا. The water is overcome. Chlorine, strong smell. The company is called smelly blue. Okay? Deep blue, strong smell, strong taste. Or it's put in the swimming pool. Would anyone say that's not water? It's water. But it's changed the color a little bit. Changed the taste. Changed the smell. But would people still call what's in the swimming pool water? Yes.
But they wouldn't use it like to clean their clothes or to drink from.
What? That's their problem. I would. To make a point, I'd like to take my whole wardrobe and wash it. Just to make a point. Now wash it again, because some kids probably urinated in it. Right? But let's say it's a big swimming pool, Olympic swimming pool. Okay? Let's say it's owned by Sidi Zaid, right? He built a swimming pool using the tenants as well. Because public property can't do that. And that's his swimming pool. So prove a point, I'll wash all my clothes. So we'll come to that. Okay? So because if you cook it with something, ما قصد به التطهير, if you cook the water with, for example, a leaf that's used like sidr, which is come in the hadith, to make the water soapy for the purpose of more effective cleaning, it's still considered water. Unless the water becomes thick, you put so much sidr that the water becomes thick, then no one would call it water. That's why this قيد صحة إطلاق بشرط صحة إطلاق اسم الماء عليه covers a lot of ground. وإن بقي على الرقة جاز به الوضوء. But if it remains on its subtlety, what wudu is permitted with it. Right? With what? به أي بما قصد به التنظيف. بما قصد به التنظيف. Right? This applies to the issue of if you cook the water with something, قصد به التنظيف, then if it becomes thick so you cannot call it water, you struck out. Right? You put loads of sidr in the water, suddenly you get some kind of soup. You can't. You put a little bit, it changes qualities, but you can still call it water. Sign it's still watery. Yes, when it cools, it doesn't thicken. Right? And someone would still call it water. It's soapy water. That's fine. But say this is something else, then okay. So that's done. Then he says, رحمه الله, ولما كان تقييد الماء يحصل بأحد الأمرين. كمال الامتزاج بتشرب النبات أو بالطبخ. So when water becomes conditioned, تقييد, but one of two things. One being completely, one is becoming mixed with something, fully mixed with something. You like تشرب النبات, such as, absorbing plants. You put leaf and it mixes with the water, right? It takes on the properties of what it mixed with. أو الطبخ, or by cooking. بما ذكرناه, with what we meant. So it's طبخ has two cases. طبخ is either ما قصد به التنظيف أم لا. So if it was used for cleanliness, then the assumption is that it remains water. Because there's an اعتبار شرعي and اعتبار عرفي in that. People used to classically cook. When they heat up the water, and طبخ doesn't mean necessarily cooked like we mean the cook. It was heated with the water, right, to make it soapy, right? And it could be طبخة, like you really want to bring out the soapy quality of that thing, but they use that to take a bath, to clean themselves, right? أو الطبخ بما ذكرنا. بين الثاني. Now he tells us about the وهو غلبة الممتزج. So what the first category is, something to be كمال الامتزاج, right? To be completely absorbed. Sorry, كمال الامتزاج تشرب النبات. This is if you cooked. If you cooked some nabat, or you cooked, to make soapy water. That's number one. طبخ. The second is غلبة الممتزج. So there's طبخ and there's غلبة الممتزج, right? The overcoming of something that's mixed, دون طبخ, without cooking. So cooking has two sides, two categories. One is cooking, cooking for tanzif and other cooking. Then now al-mumtazij, there are two cases. Something mixed with water, right? And it preponderates, which is, it's either jamid or ma'i', right? The two cases. The thing that mixed with the water is either solid or liquid. If it's solid, فالعبرة بماذا؟ بخروجه عن الرقة والسيلان أو عدم صحة إطلاق اسم الماء عليه. If it's solid, then the criteria is that it's no longer got the nature of water, which is رقة and سيلان, subtle and flowing the way water flows. And he'll explain that. And the underlying criteria in any ma that's not mutlaq is that ma mutlaq, either you can call it water. صحة إطلاق اسم الماء عليه. In the ma'i', what's the criterion? If the liquid mixes is Arabic?
طعم أو لون أو ريح.
What they have طعم? No, it's غلبة الأوصاف. Right? والعبرة في المائع بغلبة الأوصاف. That the qualities of the thing that mixes preponderate. And then same thing. If you can still call it water, it's water. If you can't, it's not. Right? So its condition is وعدم صحة إطلاق اسم الماء عليه. You can no longer call it water. And that's significant for a number of cases. Like, why is tea? Tea has رقة and سيلان. Coffee has رقة and سيلان. You pour some coffee, and we're not talking about like Turkish coffee or like a latte, just like a pour over. Pour the pour over coffee and pour water, they flow very similarly. ايش الفرق? Would anyone call the coffee water? they did, you could slap them. Not on the face, because that's not allowed. Right? And that's basically the whole chapter. That's everything else is now deep. Now let's work through the details of this, right? يعني بين الثاني وهو غلبة الممتزج بقوله أو بغلبة غيره أي غير الماء عليه, for something besides water to overcome it, أي على الماء. right? ولما كانت الغلبة مختلفة باختلاف المخالط بغير طبخ ذكر رحمه الله تعالى ملخص ما جعله المحققون ضابطا في ذلك. And when this being, the water being overcome, differs depending on the different types of things that mix with it for other than cooking, he mentions the summary of what the muhaqqiqun, the ulama of tahqiq, of verification, mentioned as a dabit, as a governing criteria for this. في ذلك أي في الغلبة. فقال رحمه الله تعالى فالغلبة تحصل في مخالطة الماء بشيء من الجامدات. So if it mixes with something solid, الطاهرات, that are pure. Because if they're najis, you have to go to department of number 4. Right? We're not talking about that. We're talking about the domain of the طاهرات. Right? بإخراج الماء عن رقته فلا ينعصر عن الثوب وإخراجه عن سيلانه. So if it mixes with a solid, it takes water out of its رقة فلا ينعصر عن الثوب. It's subtlety. Doesn't mean it's exactly like water. The sign of it having رقة, subtlety, that if you squeezed a piece of cloth, like a cloth that was affected by it, it wouldn't be squeezed up. What would be the difference from it? For example, what's the difference between a thobe affected by water versus a thobe affected by banana milkshake? Banana milk, watery banana milkshake. Imam Zayd had a dabit for a proper banana milkshake, but like a watery banana milkshake, a cheap banana milkshake, it flows too. But if you dropped it, you squeeze it, would it still remain? No, right? So it doesn't have the subtlety of water, it becomes thick. فلا ينعصر عن الثوب وإخراجه عن سيلانه, and it no longer flows like water. أي فلا يسيل على الأعضاء سيلان الماء, so it doesn't flow on the limbs like water. And he says, وَأَمَّا إِذَا بَقِيَ عَلَى رِقَّتِهِ وَسَيْلَانِهِ. Now, if it remains on its riqqa and saylans, on its subtlety and flowing, فَإِنَّهُ لَا يَضُرُ, then it's not affected, not harmed literally, not affected. أي لا يمنع جواز الوضوء به, أي the permissibility, جواز وصحة الوضوء, then the permissibility and validity of wudu is not affected. تغير أوصافه كلها, even if all the qualities. So there's the nature of water, there's طبع الماء, which is رقة and سيلان, and there's أوصاف الماء, which is طعم ولون وريح. تغير أوصافه كلها بجامد. And even if all of its qualities, طعم ولون وريح, change, if it's affected by a solid. Right? خلطه بدون طبخ, that was mixed with it without cooking. Just making clear. So if you diagram, المخالطة بالطاهر is either بالطبخ, which has 2 criteria. ما قصد به التنظيف وما لم يقصد به التنظيف. That's the طبخ. And then just you have المخالطة دون طبخ, or just mixing without cooking. There. So tea falls under cooking. Tea falls under cooking, right? Although sometimes you don't want to go into the whole cooking example, so although I'm not simplify it, but strictly. Right? And this is again with the same بشرط صحة إطلاق اسم الماء عليه, on condition that you can still call it water, which is why Maulana al-Tahtawi here says, لا يضر تغير أوصافه, قوله لا يضر تغير أوصافه ما لم يحدث له اسم آخر, as long as it does not take on another name. So you now call it like a jamid. Let's say you decided to make, okay, if you cook the tea, what happens? It's not from mukhalata, right? It's min bab al-tabkh. But what if you did cold brewed tea? Ever made cold brewed tea? I do sometimes. Coffee is not min bab al-mukhalata. Coffee is from bab al-tabkh. حقيقة أو حكما, right? Even pour over is a type of tabkh in a sense, right? But although there'll be some argument about that. But cold brewed tea, you put some tea in a container, kept it overnight, 24 hours, even 12 hours, to be honest. It'll change. Is it got riqqa? Yes. Does it have saylan? Yes. But ما لم يحدث له اسم آخر. Now you can no longer call it tea. Anyone who sees it, smells it, tastes it, says tea. Right? So that's an important thing. ما لم يحدث له اسم آخر أو بشرط صحة إطلاق اسم الماء عليه. You can still call it water. And he gives examples. كزعفران وفاكهة, such as saffron, some saffron mixed with water, or fruit fell in the water. Right? Some people make, water. They put like raspberries in the water, raspberry water, right? Or they put slices of lemon. So you got locked into your office just with a jug of water with slices of lemon. Or, okay, forget slices, with raspberries. Raspberries are solids. Smell, taste, etc. Would anyone call it water? Yeah. It's not yet raspberry juice. Use it. Right? وورق شجر, or leaves. Why? لما في البخاري ومسلم, because of what's related by Bukhari and Muslim, أن سيدنا النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم أمر بغسل الذي وقصته ناقته وهو محرم بماء وسدر. That this man who died due to his camel in a state of ihram, he said to wash over him بماء وسدر, with water and this plant sidr. Now, so the water was changed. Sidr is a solid, but ghusl requires ma' mutlaq, and the Prophet considered this ma' mutlaq. Because urfan, you would consider it water. Right? And so that's one evidentiary basis, right? Another evidentiary basis is واغتسل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بماء فيه أثر العجين. The Prophet ﷺ made wudu with water that had traces of ajeen, of flour or dough. Right? This is related by Nasa'i. Right? In the previous hadith he mentions. It's related by Bukhari and Muslim. Okay, sorry, I skipped the hadith. وَمَرَ صلى الله عليه وسلم قيس بن عاصم رضي الله تعالى عنه حين أسلم when he became Muslim, أن يغتسل بماء وسدر, to make ghusl with water with sidr. It's related by Abu Dawood in al-Tirmidhi. واغتسل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Prophet made ghusl بماء فيه أثر العجين. The hadith is related by Nasa'i and Ibn Majah and others. وكان صلى الله عليه وسلم يغتسل ويغسل صلى الله عليه وسلم رأسه بالختمين وهو جنب ويجتزئ بذلك, and he used to wash his head with ختمين, with and it's understood بماء فيه ختمين, right? With water with ختمين, which is something with a sweet smell, and he used to consider that sufficient. He wouldn't wash his head again after that. And the hadith there is related by Abu Dawood and others. And the basis is that all these things would still be called water. Okay? والغلبة, so this is the jamidat, right? So al-mukhalata bil-jamidat, we took what the criteria is. Now الغلبة في المائعات, والغلبة تحصل في مخالطة المائعات بظهور وصف واحد كلون فقط أو طعم من مائع له وصفان فقط, by the manifesting of one attribute in a liquid that has two attributes only, أي لا ثالث له. ومثل ذلك بقوله كاللبن, like, what's لبن? Milk. له اللون والطعم, it has color and taste, right? ولا رائحة له, it doesn't have smell. فإن لم يوجد جاز به الوضوء, what wudu is permitted with it. وإن لم يوجد, إن لم يوجد ماذا؟ وصف واحد. إن لم يوجد, you need وصف واحد. If not even one attribute is found, إن يوجد وصف واحد, right? If one attribute, because milk has two attributes, له وصفان. فإن لم يوجد وصف واحد, if one attribute is not found, then wudu is جاز به الوضوء, right? وإن وجد أحدهما, if one of the two attributes is found, لم يجوز, what wudu is not, and you can read لم يجوز in two ways, لم يجوز أو لم يجزي. Both are possible. It's not permitted or not valid. كما لو كان المخالط له وصف واحد فظهر وصفه, just as if the thing mixed had only one attribute and that attribute became manifest, a fortiori, right? This بالأولى, right? كبعض البطيخ, right? Like some types of watermelon, ليس له إلا وصف واحد, it only has one quality, like, there's some clear colored watermelon, it doesn't have smell, doesn't have color, but it has taste. Okay. وقوله لا رائحة له زيادة إيضاح, and it, his saying and it has no smell is for greater clarity. لعلمه من بيان الوصفين, because it's understood when we say two qualities. والغلبة توجد بظهور وصفين من مائع له وصف له أوصاف ثلاثة, and it's considered غالب, the water is considered مغلوب if it mixes with something that has three qualities, right? بظهور وصفين, if two qualities are manifest, right? بظهور وصفين, there are two qualities to be manifest in a liquid that has three qualities. كالخل, such as vinegar. له لون وطعم وريح. Like wine vinegar has 3 qualities, right? فأي وصفين منها ظهر, any 2 qualities that are manifest منها منعا صحة الوضوء, they prevent the validity of wudu. والواحد منها لا يضر لقلته, but one attribute doesn't affect because of its slightness. Now ظهر is a tricky word. It is discussed by Shaykh Abdul Ghani. But does ظهور mean for it to appear or for it to be manifest? And ظهور has both senses. Right? We discuss it. Because let's say, if you mixed, do you still have any coffee? Finished. Yeah. Come on, please, can you just fill this up? With water. Can you just check if the coffee jug is still there?
I remember it was done.
Okay, forget it. There's no need for water. Okay. So now, we're talking about ma'i'at, right? Liquids. So if we had a cup full of water, and really, so coffee, let's just say it doesn't have strong smell. Although it does, but let's say it has لون وطعم. Now, if you put 4 drops of coffee in this, you put a little bit of coffee in the water, liquid, would, if you understand ظهور to mean appear, would the color change? Would the color change? Yes. If you taste it and you've not had so much junk food that you can't appreciate subtleties of taste, or you've had so much sugar and salt that you can't appreciate subtle tastes, would the taste change a little bit? Yes. But is that ظهور? So the question is, that does ظهور mean the mere appearance? That's one meaning of ظهور. أول البدو, right? Just for the mere appearance. That's one sense of ظهور. But the other is to be manifest. Right? To be clearly manifest. Similarly, if you put several drops of milk in a glass of water, it will become a little bit murky. Is the color of the water, of the milk, has it appeared in the water? Yes. If you taste the water, does it taste the same? Change. له لون. But I believe Ibn Abdin talks a little bit about this as well, but we're talking about غلبة, being overcome. The indicator of it being overcome is what? That you would not be able to call it water anymore. Okay? So it's ظاهر, right? It's become manifest. Right? It's become manifest. The ظهور, right? That's a very useful fa'idah. Shaykh Abdul Ghani talks about it, and Ibn Abdin also touches upon it. You can share it. The related section. Okay. Now, something could have 3 qualities, 2 qualities. He doesn't mention the one quality because it's obvious. Right? And he's addressing people of presumed intelligence. Did he mention the one quality? Not in the comment, in the method. It's obvious. والغلبة في مخالطة المائع الذي لا وصف له. What if it has neither smell, color, or taste? أي لا وصف له يخالف الماء. That doesn't have any qualities different from water. بلون أو طعم أو ريح. كالماء المستعمل, such as used water. فإنه بالاستعمال لم يتغير له طعم ولا يعني ولا لون ولا ريح, because the used water did not acquire color, smell or taste. وهو طاهر في الصحيح, and it is طاهر according to the Sahih opinion. The issue of مسألة البئر has no sound basis. It's shadh. Even though it's mentioned, it's generally mentioned anecdotally as a mental test, even though Kanz al-Daqaiq mentions it, but it's, and Imam al-Tahtawi here quotes again he quoted before from Majma' al-Anhur, and now he quotes it from al-Bahr al-Ra'iq, that what they mention about the Mas'alat al-Bi'r and the different conditions, etc., that is a shadh narration from Abu Hanifa. The Sahih is that it is, all three of our Imams agree, al-Ma' al-Musta'mal is طاهر غير مطهر, pure but not purified. So if something that has the same qualities of water mixes with it, like use water. Oh, and he mentions another example, right? ومثله ماء الورد المنقطع الرائحة, such as rose water that has lost its smell and taste. Okay? Really old rose water. But someone knows that this is rose water, would they consider ma' mutlaq? No. And ma' qusira min shajarin aw thamar. That takes that previous issue that we take, right? It comes from shajar or thamar. It comes from a tree, or it's that which comes out from a tree, thamar. تكون بالوزن, تكون الغلبة بالوزن. Then the غلبة is considered by weight. لعدم التمييز بالوصف لفقده, because you cannot judge it there by the awsaf, by the qualities, because لفقده, because there are no qualities. Now, before we continue, there's one thing that Tahtawi mentioned that's very important. That the only water that is musta'mal is the water that comes in contact with the limb and separates from it. Only that is musta'mal. So if you put your water, like if you have a bucket, you stick your hands in it, what water gets musta'mal? Only the water that came in contact with your skin. That's it. Now, مستعمل لرفع حدث أو لقربة. But let's say I don't have, even if you intend qurba, you stick your hand in. What's the qurba? The rafa hadath, when does it take place? The first water that came in touch with that limb. But what if I stirred the whole pot with it? Hadath is removed, then it's tahir. So only that first water becomes musta'mal. But the rest of the water, what is its ruling? It's mutlaq. So bilwazn, a little bit of musta'mal, mostly mutlaq, all of it is mutlaq, is unconditioned water. So this would only be in a case of, let's say we're traveling and we're trying to do water conservation. So you make wudu and you let the water drip into a bucket, because you want to use that used water for other purposes. That's Allah. They see it, right? That can happen if you're camping or hiking or you have no water. So you have a little bit of water wudu. So you keep that water for other things. Right? And you can see this mentioned by Tahtawi. Right? Even if many people use that bucket of water. And this came up with the issue of so many people make wudu in, if they used to have pools of water. There's a big debate about those. So some they made these Hanafi pools. Because the masjid, in the courtyard of the masjid, they have a pool. But that's not big enough to be 10 by 10. So they extend an arm, a long arm. It's fulfilled two purposes. One, because there's a lineup of people around, like you have a little pool, a hawd. So but limited number of people. So you also make a channel. One, so the pool itself is like 5 by 5. We want to get to 10 by 10. So you do this long channel that extends. It's 1 by a bunch of, or 2 by whatever the math is. Right? A long channel coming out from it. Why? To come up to 10 by 10, basically. Then more people can make wudu with it, but it's considered ma' kathir, because the whole surface area is considered, because as long as the two are connected, got a large surface area. You can figure out a mathematically tenable version of that. Are you an engineer? What are you?
Economics.
So, but the shubha they have is all these people make wudu because you lean forward to make wudu. So they stick their hands in, musta'mal. Splash their face, musta'mal. People keep using that. Doesn't the water get exhausted? I said no. And so there's a big debate about it. Some said yes, after a long time, kada. But the mu'tamad is, it's, even if you don't refresh it, ever, eventually it starts, become mustaqdar. After a while, people do all kinds of stuff with it. I never use those pools in Damascus. You see people doing all kinds of weird things. So he says, فإن اختلط الرطلان مثلا من الماء المستعمل أو ماء الورد الذي انقطعت رائحته برطل من الماء المطلق لا يجوز به الوضوء. So if two rittles of used or rose water without taste or smell mixes with one rittle, with one measure of unconditioned water, then the conditioned water is more. لا يجوز به الوضوء. أي لا يصح. Wudu is not permitted nor valid with it. لغلبة المقيد, because the conditioned water is more. وبعكسه, and the opposite, وهو لو كان الأكثر المطلق, when the unconditioned water is more, جاز, then wudu is permitted. جاز, أي جاز به الوضوء. وإن استويا, what if they're equal? Now, this is a theoretical possibility. When you make dhann, is A more than B? The ulama say is only entertain two possibilities. Because a shak is dhannun fasid. Right? Because say they're the same. Yes, Sidi Mahmoud. Did you measure A? No. Did you measure B? No. Then how do you know that they're the same? What you are commanded to do is, if one is more than the other. So you have two choices. A or B. You say, well, somewhere in the middle. You put yourself in difficulty. So this is an important thing that, right? You need that when you have to make dhann, you need to be decisive. If you're not, you put yourself in harm. And this applies in tahara and so on, applies in life. Right? Someone's in marriage, they hit their 30s, they don't know why they're married. The niyyah is so important. Doesn't have to appear for what? Doesn't make sense. Like, why the heck? Like, why do I have to deal with kids and a grumpy husband and this and all this stuff? I don't know why I'm married. Either you have an intention or you'll be miserable. Now, you ask somebody, are you in or not? I don't know. Now, if someone's in, right? They're having a crisis with their marriage. Say, I'm in. You can do something with I'm in. You can work at improving things. If you're at a crossroads, in or out. Say, I don't know. What are you going to go do? Drive down, like, right? It's tough. You come to a crossroads, you have to say, turn right, turn left. If you're in, it's rahmah. If you're out, it's rahmah, khalas. فَأَنِقُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, pardon in a good way. But there's no third choice, which is I don't know. You'll be miserable until you do know. And that applies to anything in life. If someone's doing an economics degree, say, are you committed to finishing? I don't know. Well, I need some time to think, that's fine. But this is an important principle in life, but also in i'mal al-dhann, in things. That you only have two choices. Is it tahir, is it najis? I'm not sure. What are you going to do with I'm not sure? Right? So this is very, very important. But if that's where your dhann hits, may Allah have mercy on you and forgive you, then if you think they're equal, رضي الله عن الإمام أبي حنيفة, right? لم يذكر اسم حكمه في ظاهر الرواية. Imam Abu Hanifa didn't even answer that possibility. Why? And they entertained all kinds of possibilities, because that's not what you should be acting upon. But then the ulama then differ, right? Because if it's not a ظاهر الرواية, then the ulama would differ, right? And they say تغليب الاحتياط, right? So some said احتياط, caution. So you say the water is مغلوب. The others said no. الأصل في الماء is the أصل in the ماء is that it's طاهر, and number two, الأصل في الماء أنه مطلق. Right? So not using your judgment, it falls under وَلَنْ يُشَادَّ الدِّينَ أَحَدٌ إِلَّا غَلَبَهُ. No one makes religion difficult except the overcome. You have two choices, pick one. صلى الله وسلم وبارك. Right? وقال المشايخ, and the مشايخ said حكمه حكم المغلوب احتياطا. So the مشايخ said, meaning الكثير منهم, many of them said, treat it as مغلوب احتياطا. Others said, treat it as طاهر تيسيرا, right? And there's a lot of اختلاف on it, right? وقال غيرهم, the others said, المطلق على أصله. Okay? Because we know that the water is mutlaq, we have shak in it being مغلوب, فيكون على أصله. But احتياطا is caution. So it's legal. Others said its legal ruling is tahir, but use precaution by considering it mablub. But you made your life difficult. There's water. So what would you do then? There's water there, but you're making tayammum. Why? Okay? So this is a blameworthy thing. Imam Ghazali has a lot to say about people really hurt themselves by this. So don't do it. So this is al-ma' al-maghlub, right? Right. So just to recap quickly, pure water, right? Al-ma' al-tahir, the third category. First category was al-mutlaq, غير مكروه الماء المطلق غير المكروه استعمال طاهر مطهر غير مكروه. Second, pure purifying, not disliked to use. الماء المطلق. The second category was طاهر مطهر مكروه استعماله إن وجد غيره, if other water is found. And it's disliked to use in wudu, and is disliked for the one who has means for other water to drink it or to cook with it. Then should you give it to your animal? It's a separate discussion. Okay. And Allah. The third category is ma tahir غير مطهر. It's water that's pure, not purified. There's how many types of that? Broadly? Yeah, مستعمل and مغلوب. Right? Is used water and water that is overcome. Now the ghalaba can be in two ways. Al-ghalaba is overcome either بالطبخ, through cooking, and cooking has two possibilities. ما قصد به التنظيف is done for تنظيف. There is both a customary and a legal recognition of that. So that is not considered maghlub unless it's no longer got the riqqa, the subtlety of water, and such that you could no longer call it water. Right? Even though it's fully admixed, right? Or it's, tabkh took place and it's fully mixed, and the sign of that though is you couldn't call it water. Because sometimes it gets subtle. What if you mixed you cooked water and you put salt in it? Is salt a solid? Yes. Just طبخ الملح, would it take it out of being water? No. Okay. So that it gets tricky, but right now, and understand the concept, the conceptual breakdown. That's why please diagram this together. And then you have al-ghalaba bil mukhalid, something mixes. So of course we're talking about the pure because we're going to come to najasa next. Something pure mixes, it's either, what are the two cases? Jamid and mat'a. In the jamid, what is the criterion? In the solid? Ini? Yeah. Ini ببقاء الماء على طبعه, which is الرقة والسائل. So it's considered مغلوب إن زال طبعه. If its طبع goes, وهو الرقة والسائل. It's زوال الطبع. Which is الرقة والسائل. And the underlying criteria, صحة إطلاق اسم الماء. Right? That applies everywhere. Right? You can put it underneath for all the categories. Right? Because these are all just describing what people would still consider, would they consider unconditioned water or conditioned. And the liquids is بظهور الأوصاف. And we said we don't mean just the mere appearance, but the preponderation. ظهور أن تكون الأوصاف المخالط ظاهرة على أوصاف الماء. For the qualities of the thing that mixed with water, for them to be manifest over the qualities of the water, right? For it to overcome, right? So that the meaning of ghalaba takes place. It's not this mere appearance that there's traces of it. But the traces are almost impossible to avoid. Otherwise, everything will become used. Okay. So now we reach number 4. What's number 4? Al-ma' al-najis. Now, al-ma' al-najis, there are how many types of water? With respect to najasa? 3. And they have 2 rulings. water is either قليل, كثير, أو جاري. Water is either a small body of water, a large body of water, or flowing water. Now, الكثير يجي في حكم الجاري بحكم الكثير. Right? So the water, with respect to najasa, is of three types. If najasa affects water, then there are three considerations. A small body of water. Right? How is the small body of water affected? الماء القليل بوقوع النجاسة فيه. وأي نجاسة filling for إلا ما يعفى, except the things that are excused. And there are some things that are excused. Okay. That's one. Number two is الماء الكثير. It's, when is it considered نجس? بظهور وصف النجاسة أو أثر النجاسة وهو لون وطعم وريح. Right? The large body of water is najis if the traces of the filth become manifest. Color, smell, taste. Of course, if you have dhann that the water has najasa in it, then you cannot taste it. If you have shak, you could taste it. If you have dhann, it would be haram for you to taste it. Now some said, well, you could taste it but not swallow it, but it still be makruh. And some said that even that would not be permitted, because then there's madannat al-tanajjus. That's a separate issue. And the flowing water is like the large body of water. العبرة بظهور أوصاف النجاسة. But then it's a problem. What is a large body of water? The problem now is, what is a large body of water? ما هو الماء الكثير؟ There is no text. What we see clearly from the nusus al-shar'iyya is that there's a tafriq بين الماء القليل والماء الكثير. In a whole number of hadiths, if you look in the hadith of ahkam, they talk about al-ghadir, a large body of water, right? And a bunch of different hadiths about that nothing makes a large body of water filthy just by following. But there is no text يقوم به يعني مقدار شرعي على وجه القطع. There is no text by which a legal limit is clearly established. That tells us how much is, what is the size of that water. But also the hadiths that describe a large body of water are understood by the Hanafis to be describing a large body of water, not a large amount of water. So the Zahir al-Riwayah from all three of our Imams, including Imam Muhammad al-Hasan, from whom the 10 by 10 opinion is related, is التفويض إلى رأي المبتلى, is that the matter is consigned to the one affected. That's ظاهر الرواية. خلاص, game over. Right? Okay. But it's not quite so simple. Okay. And we talked about this a little before, but most of the later scholars went with, and that's why Imam al-Shumbulani uses heavy language for the 10 by 10, right? He says, هو المفتى به, right? I think that's what he says, right? والتقدير بعشر في عشر هو المفتى به, right? This is for حصر, right? هو المفتى به, right? There's موضوع and محمول, right? Right? خلاص. هو المفتى به أي لا غيره. The fatwa is given on this. So we'll see why fatwa is given on this, right? In a moment. So let's read. So that's al-ma' al-kathir. Now al-ma' al-jari is the fifth, right? Al-ma' al-jari, sorry, it's not the fifth. Al-ma' al-jari, flowing water. Now what is flowing water? Is there a Shari'i definition for flowing water? Shari'i meaning from the Sharia. You find a hadith that says, defining what al-ma' al-jari is? No. Jarayan, flowing, is a meaning that is known in the language. So, al-ma' al-jari ma yu'addu jariyan. Now Shafi'is get freaked out by these definitions. And some, actually, when Shaykh Amjad was younger, I was younger too, of course. And we're pretty similar. Shaykh Amjad al-Shafi Faqih. He used to like to argue about fiqh. And he's learned Faqih. So, a hard person. He's a genius. Very hard person to argue. So I'd deliberately annoy him by mentioning very Hanafi things that would shake up a Shafi. Like, what are you guys talking about? But one of my tactics against his greater knowledge was to annoy him. I had a range of tricks, but it would be like wrestling. Like you're wrestling someone stronger. There's ways you can beat them even if they're stronger than you. And sometimes it fails and you get body slammed. So the Hanafis describe al-ma' al-jari huwa ma yu'addu jariyan. Flowing water, is that what is considered flowing? Why? Because if the lawgiver doesn't give a definition, then يرجع إلى العرف. It returns to the urf or إلى رأي المبتلى. But here, jarayan, flowing, is a meaning that is clearly known in the language. But then they'll give criterion for what is considered flowing. They say ما يذهب بتبنى, that if you put a straw in it, the straw takes it away. Or they say ما يدخل من جانب ويخرج من جانب, that which enters from one side and goes out from another, right? So if it flowed on this, it came from here, went there. That's flowing. It's all describing a meaning that people know. Flowing is that what's considered flowing. So that's flowing. So this is defining the terms in what we are taking. So we have al-ma' al-qalil, al-ma' al-kathir, and flowing. So let's see what he has to say, rahimahullah ta'ala. وَالْقِسْمُ الرَّابِعُ, the fourth category of water. And it's a fourth and final practical category. Right? The fifth is a rare freaky case. مِنَ الْمِيَاهِ, of waters. مَاءُ النَّجِسِ is filthy water. وَهُوَ الَّذِي حَلَّتْ أي وقعت فيه نجاسة. It's water in which filth fell. Now, حلت, حلول, has a sense of something being in another, right? But he actually changed but because hulul could understood that it remained in the water, and that's not in بمجرد يحكم بنجاسة الماء بمجرد وقوع النجاسة فيه وإن لم تستقر. Water is considered filthy if najasa comes into contact with it, even if it did not remain there. So someone, for whatever reason, took some horse excrement and they just made it touch the water and took it out. It's actually a real case. I had a friend who asked me, is tiger excrement permissible? I said, permissible? Like, what do you mean? So someone actually gifted him. My friend started celebrating his Africanness. He's a British guy from 2 different African countries. So a friend went on a safari, and I kid you not, got him, not tiger, a lion. One of these wild animals. I think lion, because tigers aren't in Africa, I don't think. Lion excrement. What do you do with it? So it's in a case. Apparently it protects you. Do we believe in? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. And you can't use najasa in these kinds of things. So no, you can't. But let's say someone took that and dipped it in water, just dipped it in water, took it out, it's najis. Small amount of water. Unless it's from the ma'fuwat, except it's from the things that are excused. There's no need to excuse lion excrement in your household. والذي حلت أي وقعت فيه نجاسة وعلم وقوعها يقينا, and its falling into the water is known decisively. أو بغلبة الظن, okay, and this is بغلبة ظن قوي, right? يعني قوي لا مطلق الميل الغالب, right? By strong غلبة الظن, because غلبة الظن, sometimes غلبة الظن, in some cases, reasonable surety refers to just, well, is it A or B? I think it's A. It is clear preponderation. A or B? Oh, well, I think it's A. It's mujarrad al-ghalaba, just mere preponderation. But in other cases, غلبة الظن is ما كان قريبا من اليقين. Is that which is close to, so it's not مجرد الظن, بل الظن الغالب القوي. It's not just mere inclination. So if you imagine a scale, sometimes you have to do تغليب. Which way is the qibla? Oh, either this way or that way. I don't have any evidences. So, yeah, I think it's that way. Right? By some mere indicator, whatever. That's you can call that maybe غلبة الظن, but it's just mere this inclination. It's tilted this way. That's it. That's all that's needed. But it's very important to know what kind of judgment is needed in different things. There's a big difference. For example, for the qibla, do you have to go verify extensively? No. If you don't have ready thing, pray. But I think it's that way. Like with the available sign, but you're locked in a darkened room. You do your best judgment. But you ran into this lady. Don't get bad ideas. You got stuck, in the plane collapsed. There's only 3 people on the plane, so it's not khalwa. And this lady seems wonderful. Will you just talk about environmental things? I said, she's such a principled person. I think she's Muslim. Can you marry her? This bite? You just made it. I think she's Muslim. I have some signs. No, you have to have yaqeen, or something that's akin to yaqeen, right? Because some things are mabniya ala al-taysir. Other things are mabniya ala al-ihtiyat. Other things are mabniya ala al-mana'. So how much dhann is sufficient to take the place of yaqeen depends on what kind of thing it is. So some things are based on the mubah, right? So Sidi Zain gets offered cheesecake or chocolate brownie, and you have to choose one. You have to have غلبة الظن قوي, that which one would you like? Just pick one, and you don't have to have any kind of thing more than الإباحة فيها مطلق. You know, but other things, some things are based on taysir, and أحكام الطهارة are based on taysir. But it's tricky because the ma has jihatain. Very important to understand. In terms of, and this from the beautiful balance of the Sharia, in terms of protecting water, it's mabni ala al-ihtiyat. Right? The Prophet ﷺ commanded us not to urinate in water, not to urinate close to the water. If we have water at home, to cover it up. The whole bunch of things, protecting water. حفظ الماء عن النجاسة, عن الإضاعة, عن الإسراف, all kinds of things. That's into protecting water. When it comes to the use of water, it's مبني على التيسير. Right? And there's a bunch of evidentiary basis on that. Right? So this is al-Ghalabat al-Dhann. This is why Imam Takhtawi quotes a hadith that's related by Imam Malik in his Muwatta and related by a number of other authorities. It's a sound hadith that once the context is Sayyidina Umar was on a journey and with him was Amr ibn al-As radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. So sorry, Ibn al-As. Okay. Yeah, so Sayyidina Amr ibn al-As. So Sayyidina Amr ibn al-As asked, Ya sahib al-hawd, hal yaridu hawdaka as-sibaa? O owner of this pool, do wild animals drink from your pool? Because he wants to be cautious. It's a small pool of water. If wild animals drink from it, what happens to the water? And we'll see it in Ahkam al-Su'r, but the saliva follows the ruling of the meat. So if the meat is najis, the saliva would be najis. فقال أمير المؤمنين سيدنا عمر رضي الله تعالى عنه, Sayyidina Umar stepped in. And who's more careful than Sayyidina Umar? He said, يا صاحب الحوض لا تخبرنا. And some of the narration, and they had permission to use it, and he started using it. And so, and there's many other evidences about that مبنى أمور الماء على التيسير. So I want to read about, Imam Ghazali talks about this and the attitude of the Sahaba and the Tabi'een and the Salaf when it came to the matters of Tahara broadly. So what does things correctly according to Sunnah, but after that, tashaddud fiha is contrary to the Sunnah. Talks about that in Asrar al-Tahara, in the Ihya. Also, the final section of الطريقة المحمدية of Hazrat Birgivi رضي الله تعالى عنه. He talks about things that are imagined to be from caution and they're not from caution. Okay? And from that is you're going beyond the limits of the Sunnah when it comes to matters of water, and this would be one such case. So here, so one shouldn't ask. One shouldn't ask. There's water, it's changed, use it. If you want to be careful, like it's polluted, of course, does not mean it's najis. If there's shak about it's being polluted or stuff, don't drink it. Don't put it in your mouth. At some points in Jordan, the water used to be so polluted, the water being released by the Zionist entity, even though the river is called the Jordan River, right? That it was not غير صالح للشرب. Sometimes they would warn, don't even put it in your mouth. And people would still have to drink it because no other water. But medically, it's so dangerous. So some people would, who had the money, would use bottled water to make madmada. People get eye infections just by washing their faces. But like if it's, like you're, the water might be, there's some fear of it being unclean or whatever, but not najis. But unclean does not mean najis. You could skip madmada or at least, but you could still use it. Okay. So if najasa falls in it, هذا في غير قليل الأرواث. This is in other than a little bit of excrement. لأنه معفو عنه, because it's excused. كما سنذكره, as we will mention. Right? This is in like public pools. Right? Does that apply indoors, etc.? That's a separate issue. We'll look at that when we come to bit. Because if there's a little bit of excrement in some water, it's excused. It'd be considered that it didn't affect the water. This even in a small pool of water. A little bit of animal excrement, etc. يعني ما لا يحترز عنه عادة إلا بحرج. That which is not easy to avoid except with difficulty is excused. And there's many examples. We'll see them in the section on wells. We'll see them again when we come to what ما يعفى من النجاسة, what is excused of filth. وكان الماء راكدا, and the water is still. أي ليس جاريا, and راكدا doesn't mean literally still, meaning it's not flowing. ركود is stillness, أي ساكنا. قليلا, والقليل هو ما مساحة محله دون 10 في 10. It's less than 10 cubits by 10 cubits. بذراع العامة, by the common cubit. والذراع يذكر ويؤنث, and the word ذراع, which is four, from tip of fingers to elbows, in both male and female. وإن كان قليلا وأصابته النجاسة فينجس وإن لم يظهر أثرها. Then if water falls into a small amount of water, which is less than 10 by 10, which is roughly 5 meters by 5 meters, then by falling of the najasa in it, except that which is excused, it's filthy, وَإِن لَمْ يَظْهَرْ أَثَرُهَا, even if the trace of the filth is not manifest فيه, in the water. أما إذا كان 10 في 10 بحوض المربع, if it's 10 by 10 in a rectangular pool, أو 36 في مدور, or in a round one by 36, you can do the math. Now, the general principle, as Tahtawi mentions at the end, لا عبرة بالعمق, depth is not considered, as long as it's considered a body of water. Right? So لا عبرة بالعمق, but they say that depth is not considered unless it's so shallow it's not considered a body of water, just considered like a puddle. And there's water on the ground. You wouldn't say that's a body of water. Right? وعمقه أن يكون بحال لا ينكشف أرضه بالغرف. And its depth is such that the ground does not become uncovered if you take water. And Tahtawi says باليدين, with both hands. على الصحيح. وقيل يقدر عمقه بذراع أو شبر. And some others said that if it's less than 50 centimeters in depth, and others said shibr, 1 hand's span. This taqdeer, but the relied upon is it's not so shallow that if you took the water, so it's not just a puddle, it's a body of water, but there's no definition beyond that. Now, then he answers the question, but this is not ظاهر الرواية. So he's de facto acknowledging that this is not ظاهر الرواية. So what is ظاهر الرواية? التفويض إلى رأي المبتلى. Right? That it goes to the mubtala. But what is the رأي of the mubtala? In a body of water, the consideration is that if بحيث لو وقعت نجاسة في جانب لا تصل إلى الجانب الثاني, such that if najasa fell on one side, its traces would not reach the other. And this is the kind of stuff that the Jawhar al-Nayyira is really good for, right? He does beautiful things with stuff like this. So that's Zahir al-Riwayah. And it goes back to a principle, right? What's the principle? That al-maqadiru la tunsab illa min qibal al-shari', right? Al-maqadir la tunsab illa min qibal al-shari'. Limits are only established on the basis of, from the lawgiver. وَمَا لَمْ يُقَدَّرْ, and that which there's no taqdeer from the sharia, there's no limit given by the sharia, يُفَوَّض إلى رأي المبتلى. And that which does not have a taqdeer, it returns to the one affected. And this is the discussion here in Tahtawi. He explains all this, but he's not convinced, right? He's not convinced. Which is really cool, right? So, now, Imam al-Shulbulani, he's a faqih al-nafs, right? And he's also of the Qaimat al-Mazlumeen in our times, by some of those who are a little anxious in their Hanafiness, right? He is acknowledging this. He's not claiming that this is Zahir al-Riwayah. So he says, وَالتَّقْدِيرُ بِعَشْرٍ فِي عَشْرٍ هُوَ الْمُفْتَى بِهِ, right? That the specification of 10 by 10, 10 cubits by 10 cubits, this is the fatwa position, right? To put, that i.e. la ghayru, not other than this. And we'll see that he's not denying that Zahir al-Riwayah is what it is. So where did Ashr fi Ashr come? He says, bihi akhadha mashayikh Balkh. The mashayikh of Balkh, which is from the further eastern lands of the Hanafis, was one of the great centers of Hanafi, and they often had their own choices. There's the mashayikh of Iraq, that's the heartland of Hanafis. And then there are the further lands, and these are things, look in the map. This is one of the things for next time. What's Iraq? And then there's Bilad ma wara al-Nahar, the lands beyond al-Nahar. And which Nahar is this? Lots of rivers, right? And the river, those lands in English are called Transoxania, but you have to find out from an Arabic source which river are they talking about, right? And then Balkh is important, Samarkand is important, Bukhara is important. All these Nasafis, where is Nasaf? Right? And it's good to have a map of where these are. Anyways, so the mashayikh أخذ به مشايخ بلخ توسعة على الناس, to make it easy for people. Right? Right? Did I skip something? Right? Okay. فلا ينجس إلا بظهور وصف للنجاسة فيه حتى موضع الوقوع. So I missed that. So if in a large body of water, none of it becomes filthy unless the traces of the filth become manifest, حتى موضع الوقوع. So let's say there's a large body of water, and you're imprisoned. You're tied to a tree right by the water, because they wanted to give you opportunity to drink and make wudu. Some animal came and defecated right at the only point where you could make wudu and drink from. So you can see the animal excrement just below where you make wudu. Can you make wudu right on top of najasa that's in the water? Yes, you can. Large body of water. That's what he says. فَلَا يَنْجُسُ إِلَّا بِظُهُورِ وَصْفِ النَّجَاسَةِ. It's not najis unless the traces of filth are manifest. فِيهِ حَتَّى مَوْضِعُ الْوُقُوعِ. Even the place where it fell. If the traces of filth are not appearing. So it's really cold water, and you can see the excrement. You're making wudu right on top of the najasa. But no color, smell, or taste is affecting the water that you're using. Fuqaha say maybe don't taste it too much, okay? But make wudu. If you have doubts, don't even put it in your mouth, in your nose. Irham nafsa. Okay. Right? And this is وَبِهِ أَخَذَ مَشَايِخُ بَلْخ تَوْسِعَةً عَلى النَّاسِ. The Mashaykh of Balkh took this خاصة في حق من لا رأي له من العوام. This is especially for one who does not have judgment of the common person. Right? وَالتَّقْدِيرُ. So the Mashaykh Balkh took the issue of موضع الوقوع. My mistake. The موضع الوقوع to make it easier for people. والتقدير في عشر هو المفتى به. And Tahtawi quotes of Qadi Khan and many others, right? In Mukhtarat al-Nawazil, it's called al-Akthar bihi yufta. But then the author of the Bahr al-Ra'iq said, no, this does not go back to an asl al-Shar'i. That's in terms of strength of evidence. So strength of evidence, this is not legally defensible in the Hanafi school. That's the difference between theory and practice. Theoretically, what's the right opinion? Ra'i al-Mubtada. So the faqih would incline towards like pure fiqh. لا يرجع إلى أصول المذهب would entail تفويض الرأي. The mufti would say, what are you talking about? عامة الناس لا رأي لهم. This practically would confuse people. So that's the difference between al-mu'tamad and the fatwa. So al-mu'tamad في المذهب is التفويض إلى الرأي المبتدأ. And you can see this in, for example, تنوير الأبصار. Shaykh al-Islam al-Tumurtashi took this position following his teacher, Sahib al-Bahr, in his matan itself. It was explained by al-Tahtawi, by al-Haskafi, but then al-Haskafi backtracks from it. And makes clear that, but most of the mashayikh took the position of Ashar bi Ashar because it's easier for the common person. And that's the fatwa. Notwithstanding Imam Tahtawi's objection to Imam Tahtawi's 2 years, and notwithstanding the objection of Sahib al-Bahr. This is one of the interesting examples, and that's where Sahib al-Bahr says no. But he takes a position. His younger brother, Umar ibn Nujaym in al-Nahar, says no. That it's much easier for the common person. And Imam al-Haskafi agreed with that. Ibn Abidin defended the position of Ashar fi Ashar extensively. And he said also that the Imams of Tarjih of the Madhab took this position. فَعَلَيْنَا اتِّبَاعُ مَا رَجَحُوا كَمَا لَوْ أَفْتَوْنَا فِي حَيَاتِهِمْ. So it's our duty to follow what they chose, such as if they give fatwa in our times. Now that's not entirely a convincing argument necessarily. He makes it per se, but well, I'm saying that if you don't, and he quotes the line of what? إِذَا لَمْ تَرَى الْهِلَالَ فَسَلِّمْ لِقَوْمٍ رَأَوْهُ بِالْأَبْصَارِ. If you don't see the new moon, accept the opinion of those who see it with their 2 eyes. Right? That maybe you're not getting meanings that these great scholars got. Right? And he says, وَلَا بَأْسَ بِالْوُضُوءِ وَالشُّرْبِ مِنْ جُبٍّ يُوضَعُ كُوزُهُ فِي نَوَاحِ الدَّارِ مَا لَمْ يُعْلَمْ تَنَجُّسُهُ. There's nothing wrong with making wudu or drinking from, what do you have? من حب, right? 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 يوضع كوزه, from a container whose cup is put in the corners of the house, right? So there's possibility that animals could have drunk from it or najasa could have fallen. Unless it's known يعلم أي يتيقن أو يغلب على الظن ظنا قويا, right? Unless it's certain or strong غلبة الظن. ومن حوض يخاف أن يكون فيه قذى. Likewise from a hawd, from a pool in which it's feared that there be filth. Because like the athar of Sayyidina Umar, mentioned in Tahtawi, you can find it in the Muwatta of Malik. ولا يتيقن, it's not certain. ولا يجب أن يسأل عنه. It's not required to ask about it, بل لا يستحب. It's not sunnah. لو كان السنة لما تركها سيدنا عمر. سيدنا عمر would not have left it, right? وهو من هو, and there's many other examples of that. And the same thing applies to the food at someone's house. As mentioned by al-Tahtawi, you don't have to ask, is this halal or not? بمجرد الشك. بمجرد الشك. But there's more to that. We'll come to it when we see it. ومن البئر الذي تدلى فيه الدلاء والجرار الدنسة. Nor is it anything wrong with making wudu or drinking from a well into which buckets and containers that are dirty go in. Because dirt is not najas. And ihtimal that someone may have blood or this, that's all wahm. يعني وتحملها الصغار, and little kids carry them. Because kids do, have والإماء. Because kids, they're ignorant. They don't know about مسائل الطهارة. والإماء, right? And girls or female slaves. maybe لغلبة الجهل, right? ويمسها الرستاقيون, and the villagers, right? The villagers, أهل القرى, because again جهل, they don't know the أحكام الشرعية, right? بأيد دنسة, with dirty hands, right? Because they work the fields, so there's احتمال النجاسة لا يحكم به, right? ما لم يتيقن النجاسة, unless one is certain of filth. Then he says أو كان جاريا, or it's flowing. عطف على راكدا, ظهر فيه أي في الجاري أثرها, and the trace of the filth becomes manifest in the flowing water. فيكون نجسا, then it's filthy. والأثر طعم للنجاسة أو لون أو ريح, it's color, smell or taste, لها لوجود لعين النجاسة بأثرها, right? That it has color, smell or taste because of the presence of the filth. Then he says والخامس ماء مشكوك في طهوريته لا في طهارته. The fifth is water that's doubtful as to its being purified, not doubtful as to whether it's pure. Why? لتعارض الأدلة, because the proofs of this, Imam Abu Hanifa stopped that. I know it's pure, I don't know if it's purified. وهو ما شرب منه حمار, if a donkey drank from it, أو بغل, or a mule, right? And the mule is وكانت أمه أتانا, and its mother is لا رمكة. لأن العبرة للأم, because in animals it's the mother that is considered, كما سنذكره في الأسآر, in the chapter on leftover water, inshallah ta'ala, as we'll mention in the section on leftover water, inshallah ta'ala. Then we look at leftover water, and after leftover water we look at tahaddi, at using judgment. Try to be prepared for those two sections. And then adar, we don't want to go into too much detail on adar. We're going to read a little faster in the next 2 weeks, because we want to get to istinja and tahara. Sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam, walhamdulillah rabbil alamin. Since we talked about najasa, and which was coming later, but someone's interested, in Imam Laknawi's work, نفع المفتي والسائل بجمع متفرقات المسائل, which is published as Fatawa al-Laknawi, he has a beautiful classification of the different types of najasas and the different types of removal of najasa. Right? And he has a lot of very interesting things. The book, the PDF of it's online.
If somebody has 3 liters of pure water and 4 liters of mustaqil,
But just use the pure water.
let's say they poured 2 liters, waited a moment, and then poured the other 2 liters. What's the ruling of the water?
Don't do it. That requires fatwa. If someone does that, go out.
That moment of waiting, would that like render that water?
I don't know. Things like that, which what Shaykh Adib would always say, is things like that. مثل هذا يفتقر إلى نص ولو فتشنا لوجدنا. Things like this require a text. And if we search, we would find it. And Shaykh Muhammad Jum'ah, rahimahullah ta'ala, relates that from, it's very similar from Shaykh Abu Yusr Abidin. That in these things you can't give fatwa just on the general principles of the method. There are, the fuqaha, pretty much anything, you have to seek specific texts. And they're there. And so, as Mufti Rafi Usman would say, whoever knocks on the door has to then open it. All someone has to do is to give them the permission to enter or to unlock. Okay? It's a good question, but someone really wants the answer, then,